Hey, what's going on? It's your boy, Young Malera, aka Uncle Drasha, and today, I don't know how to start this, but as you may know, I made a Warlord rework video a while back, and I thought I'd follow up with some other ideas I had for reworks. Um, I don't know if I'll cover the entire cast of today, but we'll see how it goes. So, a lot of people ask me on the streams, what do you think X should have and stuff. So I'll probably answer all those questions today. I've got very minimal feedback on these so far, so they're mainly my opinions. So just take everything with a grain of salt. But without further ado, let's get into our first rework suggestion. Shugoki. Oh boy, I don't know. Now, my biggest problem with most suggestions for Shugoki reworks is they have no mind to adjusting or removing passive hyper armor. It should straight up be removed. If he's going to have anything redeeming depth wise, it's going to have to go. Now, the two solutions I came up with for replacing it is either instant hyper armor startup on all of his attacks, or make it so that after any action, he gets hyper armor for a short duration. So, like, if he does a heavy feint, he has 5 seconds of hyper armor, something like that. Now, I don't know how solid these ideas are, or if they'll just be more annoying, but I know that um, passive hyper armor needs to go. Right now, Shugoki takes 25% more damage when his hyper armor is down. So by getting rid of passive hyper armor, he might need a reduction in his overall health because of this. The reason that modifier exists in the first place is so he doesn't obviously outtrade you infinitely. I want people to understand that. But ideally, if that were to be removed, I think the ideal health pool for him would be 150, the same as Lawbringer currently has. I know it's just a 10 damage nerf, so it's nothing to be too furious over if it did happen. Now, the core of my rework idea is basically a copy of Kensei's Pommel Strike. I think in Shugoki's current state, him being very focused on guard break punishes and wall splats, I think he needs a way to get guard breaks easier, and I think he's more deserving of Kensei's Pommel Strike mechanic than maybe even Kensei is. I also think it would be cool aesthetic if he just, halfway through his heavies, he just kind of elbowed the person. There's a cool minion clearing animation they could reuse. That's a main priority with all my reworks is the least amount of unique animations. Keep in mind with all the changes I'm going to mention in this video, it also implies that the static guard bug and that there's 100 MS guard break vulnerability on rolls, so you can't just dodge roll everything. So this would actually be viable offense. For the Pommel Strike to be fair, it would have to be more like Yang Yun's, which is about 600 MS, rather than Kensei's, which is more like 400 into the chain. I think they could strike a good balance between 500 MS out of the chain. You would also have to remove the hyper armor during the actual Pommel Strike, or 100 MS before the Pommel Strike comes out and after, so that it just doesn't trade with people. Now, implying that Shugoki can get guard break semi consistently, this would also need to address something else. And what I mean by that is Demon's Embrace. Demon's Embrace would be very overtuned if he could heal 40 health and do 40 damage off of any guard break. That would be absurd. Now, the solution I think is to just. I know people are going to disagree with me right off the bat, but hear me out. 20 damage, Demon's Embrace, 20 damage healed. Demon's Embrace was never meant to be used from neutral. I think people need to get that idea out of their head. It's exclusively either a hyper armor trade move or a wall splat punish. I do, however, think that Demon's Embrace should be sped up to 1,000 MS, just so it's not confirmed on light parry, but it's slightly faster, and the recovery should be made into 800 MS instead of 2,000 or whatever it is. Another recurring theme I'm going to go on with these rework ideas is recovery cancels, and um, very similar to Berserker's with his rework. I like the fact that when you whiff your top heavy on Berserker, you can recovery cancel it into a zone or a dodge attack. It'd be really cool if Shugoki had a similar mechanic with his charged heavy, where at the moment you just kind of commit it and then you're stuck in recovery frames. Um, I think a cooler way of doing this is being able to either continue your chain after a charged heavy, or just being able to recovery cancel it with a light attack or something. That would be ideal. Now, on the subject of chain attacks, I think Shugoki is definitely suffering in this department, and a solution for this would be giving him the ability to infinite his already existing chains. So right now he has light, heavy, 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 and it would be better if you could just continue this chain alternating, or just do like a conquer thing where it's just you can choose between the attacks. This should be the standard for all heavies. Now, when people say that Shigoki's lights are too easy to parry, it's not down to it being 600 ms. Now, 600 ms lights are fucking brain dead easy to parry. It's ideally with this rework, I would want to see it go up to 500 ms. That's a given. I think the one character that should maintain 600 ms lights from neutral is Highlander, because it gives him more crushing counter frames and because he backsteps anyway. But back to the subject. I think the reason why Shigoki's is so easy to parry is because it only comes from at the beginning of his chain, so it's very predictable. Some other things that need to be tuned is his headbutt finishers should drain slightly less stamina. Um, it shouldn't be bad as what they did to Valkyrie's headbutt, where they completely made it useless, but it should be adjusted a little bit, and they should make it so you can do it on any attack rather than just the opening attacks. What that means is at the moment you can only chain headbutt if it's from the first attack out of your chain. Another minor change I'd like to see is removing the stamina regen pause off of after you use Oni charge, so that you can use it more frequently to get around and stuff because of his low mobility. I don't think it's necessary for Oni charge to return to its former glory in any way, even if it meant as out of stamina pressure. Hopefully, Pommel Strike design will do that instead. Shugoki is very difficult to work with because of his existing mechanics, and he really, he really, he really only revolved around his old Oni charge in the beginning, and that's what made him extremely strong. He's probably the strongest character in the game on release, and he's kind of been just missing from that since that's been gone. So he actually needs to be like completely redesigned from the ground up, I think. And I think this is the solution. Without further ado, I'm going to move on to our next character, which will be Lawbringer. Lawbringer is a very mediocre character in 1v1s at the moment, but in 4v4 he is very good. And I know you're going to jump to the conclusion, well, it's because of bombs. Well, not just because of bombs, it's because of his impaling charge and his long arm are very good CC tools. Now, for a lot of these rework suggestions, I talked to some people who play competitively, and I asked for their personal, reworks, and most people have like fucking 4-page documents on what they think the characters should have and shouldn't have. And for Lawbringer, I got Vinks from UDA. I got his rework suggestions here, and I'm just gonna roughly base my ideas around his. Now, I think the first thing we both agree on here is shove on block needs to go. It's just overall, it's unfun. It encourages a passive play style. It shouldn't exist. To compensate more or less, or not really to compensate. This needs to happen in general. Shove from neutral needs to be significantly buffed, and the suggestions in this by Vinks here. He says shove on neutral should be sped up to 500 ms and should be initiated 100 ms to 300 ms into dodge, which would basically be Warlord's headbutt. Right now it's 700 ms out of that same dodge property, I'm assuming, which is abysmal. That is fucking terrible. If it does get sped up that much, they might have to remove the hyper armor on the neutral shove as well. He goes further to say that it should also guarantee damage, which I do agree. It's there's no reason that the shove from neutral shouldn't guarantee damage. It's just ridiculous, honestly. Another idea I've heard a lot from Lawbringer mains is having shoves confirmed after blocked heavies. Um, I don't know how shove would have to change for this to be fair, or we'd have to separate shoves from the previous mentioned dodge shove to make this possible. But it definitely should be you should be able to chain it after a blocked heavy. Now, at the moment, Lawbringer's attack chains are pretty mediocre. Me as a Warlord main, I can make do with a light, heavy, heavy, light. That doesn't personally um, restrict me. But the problem I have is two things. Is first of all, it's too hard to chain into your unblockable and too predictable. It's light, heavy, heavy, and it's just you just parry the heavy. You can't just whiff the attacks too. It's just too telegraphed, and at this too, it consumes half your stamina. So the stamina cost for all attacks in general should just be scaled down significantly because his stamina pool is just so mediocre at the moment. It's not even funny. Another thing he suggested in here was a Swift Justice chain finisher as a chain finisher for Ad Mortems. He also suggested adding hyper armor to his heavies, which I mean, as a warlord main, you know, fuck it, dude. Why not? But I'm not gonna acknowledge this because I don't know if it's a good idea or not either, and he states that himself. But it doesn't seem unfair, and it seems to fit with this class type. So I'd be fine with that. A personal idea of mine is changing the chain for Ad Mortem on the top guard to light into heavy, the heavy being the Ad Mortem. Then from there, it would soft faint into 500 ms hyper armor lights. Kind of like how Kensei works the most, but I think Kensei's are 600 ms. I might be wrong. It could also chain into hyper armor heavies from that chain as well. I also think he overall needs a new zone attack. They don't go too far with making newly animated shit with rework, so um, I don't know if this will ever happen. My ideal vision for this new zone attack is something kind of reminiscent of Dark Souls 2's Twin Blade movesets. Not necessarily the spinning part, but just using both sides of the weapon at like different intervals for more of like an AOE effect. It just needs to be slightly faster and a little more AOE centered. That would be a very cool addition to see to the character. But yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap it up there. I know this is a very limited cast of characters we're covering, and I didn't expect it to be this short. But with I don't want to carry on for an hour making a video about this, and I think it would be more appropriate to get this one out while I still have the ideas fresh in my head, and I can get back to working on other projects as well. But I think eventually we'll cover the whole cast here and what I think they should do to them, and I can get more feedback for characters I'm not sure about. And I just want to get this one out because I don't want to sit on the shelf while I work on a full video. Instead, just get these ideas out and hear your reception and maybe correct them by the time I make a new video. So thank you all for watching. Tell me what you think of the suggestions here, what I could add, or what other characters you think could be changed and what could be changed on them. Um, but yeah, thanks for watching and goodbye. See you guys.